The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slammed shut with a sound that echoed through the crystal walls. Inside, representatives from dozens of alien species sat in their floating seats, all eyes focused on the holographic display in the center of the room. The blue light from the display cast eerie shadows across their faces as Ambassador Veltar, a tall figure with silver skin and 4 arms, stepped forward. His voice was steady, but everyone could hear the worry underneath. Council members, we have received what appears to be a final distress call from the mining colony on Kepler-4 for 2b. He pressed a button on his wrist device, and suddenly the chamber filled with the sound of explosions and screaming. Through the chaos, a female voice could be heard. It was Colony Administrator Nimra, and she sounded nothing like the confident leader they all knew. Her voice was breaking, filled with terror. This is Emergency Coordinator Nimra of Kepler-4 for 2b Mining Colony. If anyone can hear this transmission, we are under attack by Korthok raiders. They came out of nowhere with a full battle fleet. The sound of plasma weapons firing grew louder in the background. Nimra's voice became more desperate. They've destroyed our orbital defense platforms. Our security forces are completely overwhelmed. The raiders have broken through our outer barriers and are moving toward the civilian areas. We have women and children hiding in the emergency shelters, but those won't hold for long. Another explosion. Closer this time, Nimra's voice cracked. We've sent evacuation requests to every nearby system, but no one can reach us in time. The Korthok are known for taking slaves, but they kill anyone who resists. Our people are peaceful miners and farmers. They don't know how to fight these monsters. The transmission grew weaker, filled with static. The raiders are using heavy weapons against our civilian buildings. They're not just conquering us, they're destroying everything. Our children are crying in the shelters. Some of our people are already talking about surrender, hoping the Korthok will show mercy. Nimra's voice dropped to almost a whisper. We all know the stories. The Korthok don't show mercy. They'll work our people to death in their mines or worse. If there's anyone out there who can help, please. We're running out of time. We're running out of hope. The transmission cut to static, then silence. The chamber remained quiet for several long moments. Council member Zefroy, his tentacles were now twisting with anxiety, spoke first. How long ago was this message sent? 6 hours, Veltar replied grimly. Long-range communications from that sector are delayed due to the solar storm activity. Then they might already be dead, whispered another council member. Zefroy's tentacles curled tighter. What about our defense fleets? Surely we can mobilize something? Veltar brought up a star map showing fleet positions. Red dots marked. They're military ships, all clustered around major systems. Our closest battle group is 17 standard days away at maximum speed. Even if we sent them now, they'd arrive to find nothing but empty buildings and mass graves. The chamber erupted in worried chatter. Various species began arguing about responsibility, jurisdiction, and protocol. Some said the colony was too far from council space to be their problem. Others insisted they had a moral duty to help any peaceful settlement. Enough. Veltar's voice cut through the noise. There is one option we haven't discussed. He paused, his 4 hands working nervously. The Human Defense Initiative contacted us 3 days ago. They've been monitoring our emergency frequencies. A hush fell over the chamber. Everyone knew about humans, though few had dealt with them directly. Earth was a relatively new member of the galactic community, having joined only 50 years ago, but their reputation had spread quickly. What did they offer? Zefroy asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. Immediate deployment under something they call the Redemption Protocol. They claim they can have a response team at Kepler-4 for to be within 12 hours. 12 hours? Several council members spoke at once. That's impossible. Even with their fastest ships, it would take at least 2 days. Veltar nodded. That's what I thought too. But they insist they have assets already positioned in that sector. He paused again. There's just one problem. They're not sending regular military forces. What do you mean the humans were? It's vague about the details. They said the Redemption Protocol involves deploying specialized personnel who are uniquely qualified for high-risk operations against overwhelming odds. Council member Tissera, a being that looked like a walking tree with golden bark, spoke up. That sounds like mercenaries. Humans are known for their private military companies, perhaps Veltar said, but there's something else. The human admiral I spoke with seemed almost ... apologetic. She kept warning me that their methods might be considered extreme by council standards. The chamber fell silent again.
Oh.
Everyone had heard stories about human military tactics. Were effective, brutally so, but they often left their allies as disturbed as their enemies. How extreme? Zefroy asked quietly. She wouldn't say. She only mentioned that the personnel they're sending have unique backgrounds, and that, once they're deployed, the situation will be resolved one way or another. What does that mean? Think it means either the colonists will be saved, or there won't be anyone left to save. The weight of the decision settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. They could wait for their own forces and almost certainly arrive too late, or they could accept human help and deal with whatever consequences followed. The humans are waiting for our answer, Veltar said softly. They need authorization too. Cross into council space. Zefroy's tentacles had stopped moving entirely. What choice do we have? He whispered. The underground facility beneath Colorado's Rocky Mountains hummed with quiet activity. Admiral Hayes walked through the reinforced corridors, her footsteps echoing against the metal walls. This wasn't a place that appeared on any official maps. The Redemption Protocol facility was buried so deep that even most military personnel didn't know it existed. She stopped at a heavy door marked with biometric scanners and multiple warning signs. After placing her palm on the scanner and looking into the retinal reader, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the room was stark white with no windows. 3 figures sat at a metal table, their hands secured with electromagnetic restraints that could stop a charging rhino. Admiral Hayes had read their files dozens of times, but seeing them in person was different. These weren't ordinary criminals. These were people who had crossed lines that most humans couldn't even imagine. She sat down across from them and opened the first file. Lee Jun, age 34, former Navy SEAL with the Pacific Fleet. She looked up at the man sitting perfectly straight, his face showing no emotion. His dark hair was cut military short, and old scars ran down the left side of his face. Decorated soldier for 8 years, served in the Martian colonies during the Independence Uprising. Lee Jun said nothing, but his eyes never left the Admiral's face. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much and done worse. The court records show that during the siege of New Sol on Mars, your unit captured 12 rebel fighters. Instead of taking them prisoner as ordered, you executed all 12. When questioned, you claimed they were too dangerous to keep alive. Hayes closed the file. Your commanding officer testified that you showed no remorse during the trial. They were planning to bomb a civilian shelter, Lee Jun said quietly, his voice flat. Children were inside. I made a choice. A choice that got you life in prison without parole. A choice I'd make again. Hayes moved to the second file. Park Hannah, age 29, former intelligence operative with the Seoul Underground Division. The woman sitting across from her was small and looked almost delicate, but Hayes knew better. Park Hannah had killed more people than some entire military units. Trained in 17 different forms of assassination, fluent in 12 languages, and skilled in deep cover operations. For 5 years you were one of our most effective agents in the Asian Federation. Hayes paused. Until you went rogue. Park. Hannah's smile was cold. I didn't go rogue. I got tired of politicians protecting war criminals while innocent people died. So you decided to become judge, jury, and executioner. 14 government officials died by your hand in 6 months. The Seoul Underground incident left the entire Asian Federation government in chaos. Those officials were selling weapons. To human traffickers? Children were being shipped off-world as slaves while these men got rich. Park Hannah's voice was calm, almost conversational. I gave them a chance to confess and make things right. They chose to keep their dirty money instead. And you chose to kill them. I chose to stop them. Permanently. Dodd. Hayes turned to the third file, and her expression grew even more serious. Dr. Kim Woo, age 41, former military scientist with the Biological Defense Division. He's the man. Sitting at the end of the table looked like any university professor with wire-rimmed glasses and a quiet demeanor. But his calm appearance hid something much darker. Graduated top of his class from Seoul National University, dual doctorate in biochemistry and genetic engineering. He's worked for 15 years developing defensive systems against biological weapons. Hayes's voice grew colder, till you created the Busan plague. Dr. Kim adjusted his glasses and spoke softly. It was supposed to be a controlled test. A way to prove that biological attacks could be contained and neutralized. Instead, it killed 2 million people in 3 days. The entire city of Busan had to be evacuated. Cleanup took 5 years, and parts of the city are still uninhabitable. I made an error in calculation. The containment system failed. Error that turned you into one of history's worst mass murderers. Dr. Kim was quiet for a moment, then looked directly at the Admiral. I assume this mission you're offering has a very low probability of survival? Hayes set down the files. Let me be completely clear about what we're asking. There's a colony, under attack by raiders. The enemy has superior numbers, better weapons, and no mercy. We're sending you 3 against potentially thousands of trained killers. There's no backup coming, no extraction plan, and no guarantee that anyone will ever know what you did there. What kind of enemy are we talking about? Lee Jun asked. Korthok raiders. They're known for being especially brutal. They take slaves, when they can, but they kill anyone who resists. They've wiped out entire colonies before. Park Hannah leaned forward slightly. And if we refuse, you go back to your cells. Lee Jun, you'll spend the rest of your life in maximum security. Park. Hannah, your execution date is in 6 months? Dr. Kim, you'll return to solitary confinement for the next 40 years. And if we accept, if you somehow survive and complete the mission, your records will be sealed. You'll be given new identities and a chance to disappear. If you die, ... Double quotes. Hayes shrugged. Well, officially, you died in prison years ago anyway. Dr. Kim spoke up again. What resources will we have? Stealth ship, basic weapons, and whatever supplies you can carry. Everything else, you'll have to figure out on your own. The 3 prisoners looked at each other. They had nothing in common, except their crimes and their skills. But they all understood what was being offered. A chance to die for something other than their own mistakes. When do we leave? Park Hannah asked, that cold smile returning to her face. Admiral Hayes stood up. In 2 hours, I hope you're ready to become Earth's most dangerous angels of mercy. The small stealth ship Redemption shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. The 3 humans aboard had spent the last 18 hours in cramped quarters, each lost in their own thoughts about what they might find when they arrived. Now, looking through the reinforced viewports, they could see they were too late to prevent a massacre. But maybe not too late to stop it from getting worse. Orange and red flames flickered across the darkness of a space where orbital defense stations had once protected the peaceful mining colony. Twisted metal and debris floated in slow motion, the remains of structures that had taken decades to build and minutes to destroy. The sight would have been beautiful in a horrible way if it hadn't represented the deaths of thousands of innocent people. Lee Jun stood at the main viewport, his trained eyes scanning the scene. Years of military experience had taught him to read a battlefield quickly, and what he saw made his jaw tighten. Those aren't raiding ships, he said quietly, pointing at the massive vessels surrounding the planet below. Look at the formation. Heavy cruisers, battle destroyers, troop transports. At least 40 ships, maybe 50. Dr. Kim looked up from his scanner station, his glasses reflecting the glow from his instruments. The energy readings are off the charts. They're not just attacking military targets, they're systematically destroying everything. Power plants, communication arrays, even agricultural facilities. He paused, studying the data more carefully. This isn't a raid for supplies or slaves. This is complete extermination. Park Hannah was in the back of the ship, methodically checking her weapons and equipment. She had 3 different types of plasma rifles, a collection of energy blades, and several devices that weren't in any official military manual. Perfect, she said with a cold smile. I hate it when the enemy holds back. The ship's communication system suddenly crackled to life, startling all three humans. A voice came through the speakers, female and desperate, speaking in the musical language of the Zelari people. The ship's translator kicked in a moment later, converting the words into English. Unknown vessel, this is Emergency Coordinator Vena speaking from the Underground Command Center. You're the reinforcements promised by the Galactic Council. Please respond immediately. We're running out of time. Li Jun moved to the communication console and pressed the transmit button. This is Redemption Team responding to your distress call. We're here to help with your Korthok problem. Thank the stars. The relief in Vena's voice was overwhelming. How many ships are in your fleet? We need to coordinate landing zones and defensive positions immediately. Li Jun looked at his two companions, then back at the communication panel. There's no fleet, just us. A long silence followed. When Vena spoke again, her voice was confused and scared. I don't understand. Just you? Are you saying there's only one ship? One ship? 3 humans? Li Jun confirmed. But the Korthok have thousands of warriors. They have heavy weapons and battle armor. How can 3 people possibly help? Us. Park Hannah had finished checking her weapons and moved to the communication console. She pushed Li Jun aside and spoke directly into the microphone. 3 humans is all you need, she said, her voice carrying a predatory edge that made even her teammates uncomfortable. I don't understand, Vena replied. Are you some kind of special forces unit? Do you have advanced weapons or technology that can fight an entire fleet? Dr. Kim spoke up from his station. We have something better than advanced technology. We have experience with the kind of warfare that the Korthok understand. What do you mean? Li Jun took control of the communication. Again, the Korthok are used to fighting peaceful species who follow rules of war. They expect their enemies to fight honorably, to protect civilians, to show mercy to prisoners. They've never faced an enemy that's willing to be more ruthless than they. Are you saying you're going to fight them using their own tactics? No, Park Hannah said, her smile growing wider. We're going to fight them using tactics that make their methods look gentle. Dr. Kim was monitoring the Korthok communications frequencies, listening to their battle reports. They're confident, he reported. Overconfident, actually, they think. They've already won. Their commanders are talking about the celebration feast they'll have once they finish killing the last of the colonists. How long do we have? Li Jun asked. Based on their current rate of destruction, maybe 6 hours before they overrun the last civilian shelters. Li Jun studied the tactical display showing the positions of Korthok forces on the planet's surface. 6 hours to turn the hunters into the hunted. Is that possible? Vena asked over the communication system. Can you really stop an entire army? The 3 humans looked at each other. They were criminals, killers, and worse. But they were also the most dangerous people Earth had ever produced. And they were about to remind the galaxy why humanity was feared as much as they were respected. Emergency Coordinator, Li Jun said into the microphone. You're about to learn why the Galactic Council was afraid to send us. We're not here to save your people the nice way. We're here to save them the only way we know how. Which is, making the Korthok wish they'd never heard of this system. The first sign that something had gone wrong came at dawn on the second day. Patrol Unit 7 had been scheduled to check the northern mining facilities and report back within 3 hours. When 6 hours passed without any communication, Warlord Dexkar sent a search team to investigate. What they found made even hardened Korthok warriors step back in shock. The patrol's armored vehicles were still there, undamaged and running. But the soldiers were gone, not just missing, completely vanished. No bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle. It was as if 12 fully armed warriors had simply ceased to exist. How does an entire patrol just disappear? Dexkar demanded, his massive frame pacing back and forth in the command center. The Korthok warlord stood nearly 8 feet tall. With natural armor plating and razor-sharp claws that could tear through metal, he had conquered dozens of worlds and never faced an enemy that could make his warriors simply vanish. The second patrol disappeared 12 hours later. But this time, The humans left a message. The search team found the missing soldiers arranged in a perfect circle in the middle of a cleared area. They weren't dead. They were worse than dead. They had been paralyzed somehow, left conscious but unable to move, their eyes wide with terror. But it was the arrangement that truly disturbed the Korthok commanders. The bodies spelled out words in ancient Korthok script, curse words that hadn't been used in centuries. Words that meant your death comes slowly and fear the shadows. Whoever had done this knew their language, their culture, their deepest fears. "Sir," Lieutenant Greystock reported, his voice shaking slightly, "the third patrol we sent out, they're not responding to communications." The Xkara's claws dug grooves. "In the metal table, send a full company to find them. 50 warriors, heavy weapons, air support. Sir, I already did. It was 6 hours ago. They're not responding either." For the first time in 40 years of warfare, Warlord Dexkar felt something he hadn't experienced since he was a young soldier. Genuine fear. Not fear of death. Death was honorable. This was fear of the unknown, of an enemy that fought unlike anything he'd ever faced. High above the Korthok encampment, hidden in the rocky cliffs that surrounded the mining colony, Li Jun watched the enemy base through his electronic scope. His years as a Navy SEAL had taught him to read enemy behavior, and what he saw made him smile grimly. "They're changing their patrol patterns again," he reported quietly into his communication device. "Sentry rotation every 37 minutes now instead of every hour. They're posting double guards at every checkpoint." "Good," came Parkana's voice through his earpiece. She sounded slightly out of breath, and there was something else in her voice. Satisfaction. Fear makes them predictable. When people are scared, they follow patterns more rigidly. They become easier to trap. "Where are you now?" Li Jun asked. "Just finished visiting their supply depot. They won't be getting any more ammunition deliveries for a while." Li Jun didn't ask what she had done to the supply team. He didn't need to know the details, and honestly, he didn't want to know. Parkana's methods were effective, but they were also the kind of thing that gave him nightmares. A few miles away, Dr. Kim was working in a makeshift laboratory he'd set up in an abandoned mining tunnel. His equipment was basic, just what he could carry in a backpack, but it was enough for what he needed to do. He looked up from his work as Li Jun's voice came through his communication device. "How's the special project coming along?" Li Jun asked. Dr. Kim adjusted his glasses and smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "The Korthok physiology is remarkably uniform. They're all basically the same species with very little genetic variation, so that makes them vulnerable to targeted biological agents." "Are you talking about another plague?" "Nothing so crude. This is much more precise. It will be ... effective." Back in the Korthok command center, the reports were getting worse by the hour. Patrol teams were disappearing, supply convoys were being destroyed, and the few survivors who made it back were telling impossible stories. They spoke of enemies who moved like ghosts, who seemed to know exactly where every Korthok would be before they got there. "They're not fighting us like soldiers," Greystock reported to his commander. "They're hunting us like animals. They know our weaknesses, our fears, our patrol routes. It's like they can read our minds." The Xkar studied the tactical display, trying to make sense of the chaos. Red marks showed where his forces had been attacked, and the pattern made no sense. The humans weren't trying to capture territory or destroy strategic targets. They were simply killing his warriors in the most psychologically damaging way possible. "How many humans are there?" he asked. "Intelligence reports say 3, sir, but that's impossible. 3 individuals cannot do this kind of damage to a trained army. Then the intelligence is wrong. There must be more of them." But deep down, the Keskar was beginning to suspect that the intelligence was correct. He had heard stories about human warriors, whispered tales shared by other warlords who had survived encounters with Earth's military. Humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to terrify. They turned warfare into an art form of psychological destruction. Meanwhile, the underground shelters where the Zellery colonists were hiding, Administrator Nimra was receiving regular reports from the human team. Each report was more disturbing than the last. "They're not soldiers," she whispered to her aide as they reviewed the latest intelligence. "Soldiers fight with honor. even when they're fighting for survival. These humans, that. There's something else entirely. Her aide looked at the reports with growing horror. But they're winning. Korthok are afraid for the first time since they arrived. Yes, they're winning. But what kind of victory is this? What kind of people are we allying ourselves with? Namara stared at the reports in silence. The humans were saving her people, but she was beginning to wonder if they were simply replacing one nightmare with another. The underground bunker that served as the Zalari command center had been quiet for days, filled only with the soft hum of life support systems and the distant rumble of explosions from the surface. But now, voices echoed off the curved walls as Administrator Nimra faced the three humans who had come to save her people. The meeting had started as a routine briefing, but it had quickly turned into something much more uncomfortable. Stood at the head of the metal table, her scaled hands pressed flat against its surface. Her usually calm demeanor had cracked completely, revealing the fear and disgust she'd been hiding for days. "We asked for help," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "We asked for soldiers, for warriors who could protect innocent people. What we got was... She gestured helplessly at the datapad in front of her, which showed surveillance footage from the latest human operation. Park Hannah sat backwards in her chair, cleaning her fingernails with a small blade. She didn't even look up as she spoke. "What you got was results. How many of your people have died since we arrived? That's not the point." "That's exactly the point," Li Jun said. From where he stood near the wall, his arms crossed. "Before we got here, the Korthok were killing hundreds of your people every day. Now they're too scared to leave their camps after dark." Nimra shade. A younger Zalari named Keshra pulled up the footage on the main screen. "Look at this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is what they did to the patrol they captured 2 days ago." The image showed a Korthok soldier, still alive but paralyzed, his eyes wide with terror. Around him, symbols had been carved into the ground using some kind of acid that ate through metal and stone. The symbols formed words in the Korthok language. But they weren't just threats. They were psychological warfare designed to break the enemy's will to fight. "They kept him alive for 18 hours, Keshra continued. 18 hours of knowing he was going to die, but not knowing when or how. The other Korthok found him eventually, but by then the damage was done. 3 more patrol units refused to leave their base after seeing what happened to him." Dr. Kim looked up from his portable workstation where he'd been analyzing Korthok communication intercepts. "It's working perfectly," he said in his quiet, professorial voice. "Their morale's collapsing faster than I calculated. 17 ship. Crews have requested transfers to other systems. 6 patrol units have gone all. Their command structure is breaking down." "At what cost?" Nimra demanded, her voice rising. "You're not just fighting the Korthok, you're terrorizing them. And in the process, you're terrorizing us too." She activated another screen, showing surveillance footage from inside the Zalari refugee shelters. Children huddled together, afraid to sleep. Adults jumped at every sound, worried that the humans might decide they were a threat too. The supposed saviors had become almost as frightening as the enemy. "Our people are having nightmares," Nimra continued. "They're afraid to go outside, afraid to speak too loudly, afraid that they might accidentally anger you. Some of them have asked me if we made the right choice in accepting your help." Park Hannah finally looked up from her blade, her expression cold. "Would you prefer to be afraid of us, or dead because of the Korthok? That's not a fair choice." "Fair." Park Hannah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think warfare is supposed to be fair? You think the Korthok were going to give your children a fair chance when they came to harvest slaves?" Li Jun stepped forward. "Administrator, I understand your concerns, but you need to understand something about the enemy you're facing. The Korthok don't respond to mercy. They don't respect peaceful negotiations. They understand only one thing: superior violence. But the way you're applying that violence... double quotes. Nimra shuddered. "It's not just about winning anymore. It's about making them suffer." "Yes," Dr. Kim said simply. "Suffering is the point. Fear is the weapon. When your enemy is more afraid of you than death itself, they stop fighting. It's the most efficient way to end a war." Nimra looked at each. of the humans in turn. And what happens when this war is over? What happens when the Korthok are gone? Will you just leave? Or will you decide that we're the next threat that needs to be eliminated? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. The three humans exchanged glances, and for a moment, something passed between them that the Zelari couldn't understand. That depends, Li Jun said finally, his voice soft but carrying an undertone that made everyone in the room suddenly aware of how dangerous he was. That depends on whether you still need us when this is over. What do you mean? Park Hana said, standing up and stretching like a cat. That we're very good at solving problems, all kinds of problems. If you're smart, you'll make sure. You're never a problem that needs solving. Dr. Kim packed up his equipment with methodical precision. The Korthok will be dealt with within 72 hours, he said without looking up. After that, we'll be gone. Whether you remember us as saviors or monsters is entirely up to you. The three humans filed out of the bunker, leaving the Zelari alone with their fears and their gratitude. In the silence that followed, Nimra realized that her people had been saved. But they had also learned something terrible about the galaxy they lived in. Sometimes, the only thing that could stop a monster was an even bigger monster. The command center of the Korthok, its flagship, had been unusually quiet for 3 days. Warlord Thexkar stood before the massive viewing screen, watching reports stream in from his ground forces. Each report was worse than the last. Another patrol missing. Another supply convoy destroyed. Another outpost found empty with his warriors. Simply gone, his massive claws scraped against the metal railing as he tried to control his rage. 40 years of conquest had taught him that fear was a weapon, but now someone was using that weapon against him. The humans had turned his own tactics back on him, and it was driving his forces to the edge of panic. Thought approached cautiously. We've lost contact with the Eastern Supply Depot. That's the 4th depot in 2 days. Thexkar's patience, already stretched to the breaking point, finally snapped. His roar echoed through the command center, causing several junior officers to step back in fear. These cowards hide in the shadows and strike like insects. They think they can break us with their sneaky attacks. He turned to face his officers, his eyes burning with fury. If they want to play games with civilian lives, then we'll show them what real brutality looks like. Bring me 10 Zelari prisoners. It's not soldiers, civilians. Women, children, elderly. The most innocent ones. We have Greystock hesitated.
Sure.
Executing prisoners might anger the Galactic Council. It could bring more enemies against us. Let them come, Thexkar snarled. I'm tired of being hunted by 3 pathetic humans. We'll show them the price of defying the Korthok Empire. 2 hours later, the executions began in the central square. Of the colony's main city, the Korthok had set up broadcasting equipment to ensure the message reached every corner of the system. 10 Zelari civilians, including 2 children and an elderly female, were forced to kneel in a line while Korthok warriors stood behind them with energy weapons. Thexkar himself stood in front of the camera, his massive form casting a shadow over the prisoners, human demons. He roared, his voice carrying across the broadcast frequencies. You think you can terrorize my warriors and hide in the darkness like cowards? You think your sneaky attacks make you strong? He gestured to the prisoners behind him. For every day you continue this cowardly warfare, 10 more innocents die. Every shadow attack, every ambush, every one of my soldiers who disappears, I will take it out on these people. Face us in honorable combat, or watch your allies perish one by one. The executions were swift but public. Thexkar made sure the cameras captured every moment, broadcasting the deaths across the system. His message was clear. If the humans wanted to play psychological warfare, the Korthok would escalate beyond anything they could imagine in their hidden base. Carved into the rocky cliffs overlooking the colony, the 3 humans watched the broadcast in complete silence. The portable screen showed the executions in brutal detail, and for several minutes after it ended, none of them spoke. Dr. Kim's hands were shaking as he stared at the now dark screen. Among the victims had been a young Zelari scientist named Tashara, who had helped him analyze the local plant life for his biological weapons research. She had been kind, intelligent, and completely innocent of any wrongdoing. "He's forcing our hand," Li Jun said quietly, his voice flat with controlled anger. "This isn't about military strategy anymore. He's trying to make us choose between our tactics and civilian lives." Park Hannah stood up from her chair, her movements fluid and predatory. "Good. I was getting tired of the shadows anyway. All this sneaking around was starting to bore me." "This changes everything," Dr. Kim added, his voice barely above a whisper. "We can't maintain our guerrilla tactics if civilians die for our actions. Every attack we make now will cost innocent lives." Li Jun nodded grimly. "Then we end this. All of it. Tonight, what are you thinking?" Park Hannah asked, and there was something eager in her voice that made Dr. Kim uncomfortable. "Direct assault. Full force. We take out their command structure in one coordinated strike." "That's suicide," Dr. Kim protested. "There are thousands of them, and only 3 of us. Even with our advantages, we can't fight that many enemies at once." "We don't need to fight them all," Li Jun replied. "We just need to kill the right ones. Cut off the head, and the body dies." As the 3 humans began planning their final assault, none of them noticed the small tracking device that had been carefully placed on their equipment. The device was broadcasting their location and conversations to a receiver hidden in the Zalari refugee camp. Administrator Nimra sat in her private quarters listening to the humans' plans with growing horror. For the past week, she had been in secret communication with the Galactic Council, sending detailed reports about the humans' methods and mental state. The Council had been horrified by what they learned. "They're not stable," she whispered into her encrypted communicator. The broadcast pushed them over the edge. "They're planning something that will either save us all or destroy everything." The voice on the other end was calm but concerned. "Admiral Veltar here. We have a fleet moving toward your position, but we're still 12 hours away. Can you contain them until we arrive? Contain them?" Nimra laughed bitterly. "Admiral, you don't understand. These aren't soldiers we can give orders to. They're barely controlled weapons of mass destruction, and now they're angry." "Then pray they're pointed in the right direction," Veltar replied. "Because if they're not, your colony may not survive its salvation." The first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon as the 3 humans emerged from their hidden base. To anyone watching from the Korthok stronghold, it looked like madness. 3 figures walking openly across the barren landscape toward a fortress, defended by hundreds of armed warriors. It appeared to be suicide. Warlord Vexkar stood in his command bunker, watching the approaching humans through his tactical display. After days of shadow warfare and psychological terror, he could hardly believe what he was seeing. "They're actually coming to us," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of relief and anticipation. "Finally, they show themselves for the cowards they are." His Lieutenant Greystock studied the display with confusion. "Sir, there are only 3 of them. Surely this is some kind of trick." "Of course it's a trick," Vexkar growled. "But what kind of trick can 3 humans possibly pull against 400 of our best warriors? They're desperate. The executions worked. They're making a final hopeless gesture." The humans moved with steady purpose across the open ground, making no attempt to hide or seek cover. Li Jun carried a standard plasma rifle, while Park Hannah had her collection of blades and smaller weapons. Dr. Kim seemed to be carrying only a backpack and some kind of portable device. "All units converge on the main courtyard," Vexkar commanded. "I want every warrior we have surrounding them. Let's finish this once and for all." What the Korthok warlord didn't understand was that he was doing exactly what the humans wanted. For 3 weeks, every attack they had made, every patrol they had eliminated, every supply line they had cut had been designed with this moment in mind. They had studied Korthok tactics, learned their psychology, and manipulated their responses. The courtyard of the stronghold was a perfect killing ground, a wide open space surrounded by high walls with limited exits. Under normal circumstances, it would be a trap for anyone foolish enough to enter. But the humans had spent weeks making sure it would become a trap for the Korthok instead. As the 3 humans entered the courtyard, Korthok warriors poured in from every entrance. They came from barracks, from guard posts, from supply depots. Exactly as the humans had calculated, Dexcar was committing almost his entire ground force to this single engagement. Now they're trapped, Greystock said with satisfaction. 400 against 3. This will be over in minutes. But as the battle began, it quickly became clear that something was wrong. Li Jun moved with mechanical precision, his weapons cutting through Korthok ranks with impossible efficiency. Each shot found its target. Each movement was perfectly calculated. He didn't fight like a desperate man making a last stand. He fought like someone executing a carefully planned operation. Park Hannah was even more disturbing to watch. She moved between the Korthok warriors like a dancer, her blades finding weak points in their armor with surgical precision. She didn't just kill, she moved with a fluid grace that made death look like art. Warriors who had faced her found themselves hesitating, confused by her strange combination of beauty and lethality. How are they doing this? Dexcar demanded. Watching his forces struggle against just 2 humans. Where's the third one? Dr. Kim had positioned himself in the center of the courtyard, seemingly oblivious to the battle raging around him. He was working with his portable device, adjusting settings and monitoring readings. Plasma fire scorched the air around him, but he remained focused on his task. Biological agent deployed, he announced calmly into his communicator, his voice carrying clearly over the sounds of battle. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The fight continued, with Li Jun and Park Hannah holding their own against impossible odds. But then, carried by the morning wind, an invisible aerosol began to spread through the courtyard. The first Korthok warrior to collapse was a young soldier, had been advancing on Dr. Kim's position. His legs simply stopped working, and he fell forward, his weapon clattering across the stone floor. He was still conscious, still aware, but his body would no longer obey his commands. Within minutes, the effect spread through the entire courtyard. One by one, Korthok warriors began to collapse. They weren't dying, they were worse than dead, were completely paralyzed. Their nervous systems shut down by Dr. Kim's precisely engineered compound. They could see, they could hear, they could think, but they couldn't move. What have you done? Scar roared, as his own limbs began to fail him. The massive warlord, who had terrorized dozens of worlds, found himself falling to his knees, then collapsing completely. His voice was the last thing to go, his final words lost in a whisper. Li Jun stood over the fallen warlord, his weapon still smoking from the battle. What we came here to do, he said quietly. We've removed your ability to harm anyone ever. Again, the courtyard was now filled with hundreds of paralyzed Korthok warriors, all conscious but unable to move. The psychological effect was devastating, a fate worse than death. A living nightmare that would haunt any survivors. But as the 3 humans surveyed their victory, Park Hannah noticed something troubling. Near the edges of the courtyard, where the Korthok had been holding Zelare prisoners, some of the civilians were also showing signs of paralysis. Kim, she called out, your weapon. It's not as specific as you claimed. Dr. Kim looked up from his device, his expression troubled. The wind patterns were stronger than I calculated. The agent spread further than intended. Li Jun moved quickly to check on the affected Zelari. They were experiencing the same paralysis as the Korthok, though their symptoms seemed less severe. How many? He asked. 18 civilians affected, Park Hannah reported. They're alive, but ... But we may have saved them from the Korthok only to condemn them to a different kind of hell, Dr. Kim finished quietly. The victory was complete, but its cost was becoming clear. The humans had accomplished their mission, but in doing so, they had revealed just how dangerous their methods truly were. The silence in the courtyard was broken by the distant hum of approaching ships. 6 hours had passed since the battle ended, and the 3 humans had spent that time sitting quietly among the paralyzed Korthok warriors, waiting for what they knew would come next. The Galactic Council fleet descended from the sky like a swarm of silver insects, their sleek ships casting shadows across the devastated stronghold. Admiral Veltar's flagship landed first, followed by medical transports and investigation vessels. The admiral himself emerged from his ship with a team of armed guards. Though he wasn't sure if they were there to arrest the humans or protect them. Veltar had seen many battlefields in his long career. But nothing had prepared him for what he found in the courtyard. Hundreds of Korthak warriors lay scattered across the stone floor, their eyes wide and aware, following every movement of the investigation team. They were alive, conscious, but completely unable to move. It was like walking through a museum of living statues. At the center of this scene sat the three humans. They had laid their weapons aside and sat calmly on the ground, their hands visible and empty. They looked tired but not defeated, like soldiers who had completed a difficult mission and were now ready to face whatever consequences awaited them. "Report," Admiral Veltar demanded, his voice echoing off the walls of the courtyard. Li Jun looked up at him with steady eyes. "Mission accomplished, Admiral. The Korthok threat to this colony has been permanently neutralized." "Permanently?" Veltar studied the paralyzed warriors around them. "What exactly did you do to them?" Dr. Kim adjusted his glasses and spoke in his quiet, professorial voice. "I developed a targeted neurological agent. It shuts down motor function while leaving cognitive abilities intact. The effect is permanent for Korthok physiology, but temporary. For most other species, you created a biological weapon," Veltar accused, his voice filled with disgust. "I created a tool," Dr. Kim corrected calmly. "The specificity was negotiable based on the tactical requirements of the situation." Admiral Veltar's guards shifted nervously as they realized what they were hearing. These humans had deliberately created a weapon that would permanently disable an entire species while leaving others relatively unharmed. It was a level of biological warfare that even the most advanced civilizations considered too dangerous to develop. "And the civilians?" Veltar asked, dreading the answer. 18 Zalari civilians were affected by the bioweapon, Dr. Kim replied. They were too close to the deployment zone when the agent was released. However, they'll recover full motor function within 72 hours. The Korthok won't. At that moment, Administrator Nimra approached the group, flanked by several other Zalari officials. Her expression was a complex mixture of emotions: gratitude, terror, relief, and something that might have been shame. "They saved us," she said quietly, her voice barely audible above the wind. "The Korthak would have killed every person in this colony. Men, women, children, all of us would be dead or enslaved by now." She paused, looking at the three humans with an expression that was hard to read. "But I don't know what we've been saved by. Are they our saviors, or are they something else entirely?" Parkhana smiled at her words, but it wasn't a warm smile. "Does it matter what we are?" she asked. "Your children are alive. Your colony stands. The Korthok will never threaten anyone again. Isn't that what you wanted?" "But at what cost?" Nimra replied. "The things you've done, the methods you've used, ... How do we live with ourselves, knowing what we've allowed to happen?" Li Jun stood slowly, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "That's not our problem to solve, Administrator. We came here to stop the Korthok. We've done that. What you do with your conscience is up to you." Admiral Veltar stepped forward, his forearms spread in a gesture of authority. "And what about you three? What do you want in return for your ... services?" "Nothing," Li Jun replied simply. "This was our choice, our chance to balance the scales. For what we've done in the past, balance the scales." Veltar studied the human's scarred face. "What do you mean? We're not good people, Admiral. We've all done terrible things. This mission was our chance to use our particular skills for something positive, even if our methods were ... questionable." Dr. Kim packed up his equipment with methodical precision. "We volunteered for this mission knowing it was likely a one-way trip. We're not heroes, and we're not expecting to be treated as such. And if we judge you criminals for your methods here," Veltar asked, "if we decide that what you've done is too extreme to be justified." Parkhana laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Then judge us. We knew the price when we came here. We're not afraid of consequences. The question," Li Jun added, "is whether you're more concerned with how we won or with the fact that we won it all." Admiral Veltar looked around the courtyard at the paralyzed Korthok warriors. then at the grateful but terrified Zalari civilians. The humans had accomplished something that would have been impossible for any conventional military force. They had stopped a massacre and saved thousands of innocent lives, but they had done it by becoming something that frightened even their allies. The courtroom on the Galactic Council's capital world was packed with representatives from dozens of species, all waiting to hear the verdict that would determine the fate of the three humans. The trial had lasted 3 months, with testimony from military experts, ethics committees, and survivors from both sides of the conflict. Li Jun sat in the defendant's chair, its expression unchanged as the Chief Justice read the final judgment. After careful consideration of all evidence presented, this court finds that while your methods were extreme and troubling, they were employed in defense of innocent life against an enemy that showed no mercy. The courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations as the verdict was announced. You are hereby granted a full pardon for your actions on Kepler-4 for to be. Additionally, the Galactic Defense Force has authorized me to offer you a position as a tactical advisor with full military honors. Li Jun stood slowly and shook his head. Thank you, Your Honor, but I decline. I'm not cut out for official military service anymore. 3 days later, he disappeared into the Outer Rim territories, taking only a small ship and basic supplies. Some said he was seeking redemption for his past crimes. Others whispered that he was looking for new places where his particular skills might serve a greater good. Either way, his name began appearing in reports from remote colonies, always when raiders attacked, always when the innocent needed protection, and always when conventional forces couldn't reach them in time. Park Hannah's trial ended differently. When offered a choice between returning to Earth's prison system or accepting permanent exile from human space, she chose exile without hesitation. I've spent enough time in cages, she told the court. I'll take my chances in the dark. She became something of a legend in the frontier regions. A wandering guardian who appeared when colonies were threatened by pirates or slavers. Her reputation preceded her like a shadow, and many criminal organizations simply abandoned their plans when they heard she was in the area. She never stayed in one place long, never accepted payment for her services, never explained why she chose to help. Children in remote settlements would sometimes catch glimpses of her, a small, dangerous woman with sad eyes who watched over them from the shadows. Their parents would tell them stories about the ghost who protected the innocent. Though they never mentioned that their guardian had once been one of Earth's most wanted criminals, Dr. Kim chose a different path entirely. When offered the same choices as his companions, he surprised everyone by voluntarily returning to Earth's maximum security prison. I have work to finish, he told the court, and I need to pay for what I've done. But his imprisonment came with conditions. The Galactic Council had been impressed by his biological weapons research, despite their horror at how he'd used it. They offered him a deal. He could continue his research in solitary confinement, but only for defensive purposes and under strict supervision. His cell became a laboratory where he developed new medical treatments and defensive biotechnology. His work saved millions of lives over the years, though he never sought recognition or early release. He considered it a small payment toward the debt he owed for the Busan plague. The redemption protocol was officially discontinued after the Kepler-4 incident. The files were sealed, classified at the highest levels, and buried in the deepest archives of the Human Defense Initiative. But copies existed in secure databases, waiting for the next time the galaxy faced a threat that conventional forces couldn't handle. On Kepler-4 life gradually returned to normal. The colony prospered, the mining operations resumed, and children played in streets that would have been graveyards without human intervention. But the memory of their saviors lingered like a shadow over the settlement. The children played quietly, their laughter somehow more subdued than before. Their parents still locked their doors at night, not from fear of raiders, but from the memory of the 3 humans who had saved them. They were grateful, but they were also frightened by what they had learned about the price of survival. Administrator Nimra kept the final transmission the humans had sent before leaving the system. She played it sometimes in the quiet hours of the night, trying to understand the people who had saved her world. Peace is not the absence of violence, the message said in Li Jun's steady voice. It's the presence of justice. Sometimes justice requires monsters. We were happy to be your monsters for as long as you needed us to be. The galaxy learned something important from the Kepler-442b incident. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology, their numbers, or their military might. It was their willingness to sacrifice their souls for others' salvation. They could become whatever the situation required: heroes, soldiers, or monsters. Other species found this both inspiring and terrifying. The humans were capable of great compassion and terrible violence, sometimes in the same person. Cross lines that other civilizations wouldn't even approach, and they would do it with a clear conscience if they believed it served a greater good. The story of the three humans became a cautionary tale told throughout the galaxy. It was a reminder that sometimes the cure could be worse than the disease, and that salvation often came at a price that the saved couldn't afford to pay. Years passed. The paralyzed Korthak warriors eventually died, still conscious but unable to move, their eyes finally closing in a mercy that had been denied them for so long. The colony on Kepler-442b grew and thrived, becoming a symbol of resilience and survival. And somewhere in the dark between stars, three humans continued their separate paths, carrying the weight of what they had done and the knowledge that they would do it again if necessary. They were Earth's monsters, humanity's darkest angels, and the galaxy's most reluctant saviors. They had learned that sometimes the only way to preserve the light was to embrace the darkness, that the greatest heroes were often the ones who could never be called heroes at all. In the end, the price of peace wasn't measured in credits or lives, but in the souls of those willing to pay it. And humanity, for better or worse, had proven they were willing to pay any price for the survival of the innocent.